Hi, my name's Thete, a mythic raider with a lot of experience raiding cutting edge content. In this series, I take a look at aspects of the game that may be holding WoW players who want to push onto higher difficulties or faster progress in raids. In this video, I'm going to take a look at key bindings. So, to keybind or to click. New players of games such as World of Warcraft will naturally click. We're used to using a mouse with computers, and the game facilitates this pretty well. When I first started playing computer games in the very early 1980s, there was no real option but to use keys. There was no other input device for my Spectrum or Electron. Sure, you might be able to attach a joystick, but that just had movement plus a single action button. But the age of the PC dawned a very long time ago, and people now naturally gravitate towards using the mouse. So what are the advantages of key binding when it's more effort to set up and learn? We have quite a lot of abilities in an RPG such as World of Warcraft, and even with a sensitive mouse there's a certain amount of travel time in moving between them. It also means that our gaze is going to be focused on our action bars instead of the area around our character. As each expansion has come and gone, boss fights and raid fights in particular have included many mechanics where you have to react very quickly to visual cues, such as a harmful ground effect. You are much less likely to be able to react quickly if you're splitting your attention to different parts of the screen. For a number of expansions I have tended to click as DPS but bind as a healer. The reason for clicking was that I had a very basic setup and we had very few abilities. Unpredictable mechanics were fewer and my monitor was a lot smaller, so I could easily see the whole thing without having to move my gaze through large angles. There have been many instances throughout WoW where a pseudo-elite attitude has held that clicking is bad, but often been punctuated by the discovery that really good players have been clicking. So if your performance is really good and you click, is there any need to bind? The answer is obvious, no. However, I think that the number of specs and roles that allow for clicking at a high level is greatly reduced, almost to the point of being zero now, and the onset of each expansion only makes it harder. When I came back to the game after a long break between the end of Tier 7 and the beginning of Tier 13, for hardcore raiding at least, I realised that there was too much to do now. I was still clicking because it takes a certain amount of time to train yourself to change. During the transition period you'll probably find yourself using a bizarre mix of click and bind, and that will make you a worse player than if you just clicked. It also takes a little time to work out how best to set your different binds. However, at a time when the new class mechanics are being released, this is the perfect time to change from clicking to binding. Indeed, I did it at the same point at the end of Cataclysm. Once you've made the change, nobody really regrets it. So what I'm going to talk about now is how to set up those binds. The first thing to do immediately is to change your strafe left to A and strafe right to D. This will overwrite the turn left and turn right binds. Do not rebind these. They are slow and will impede you when you need to move away or towards something quickly. You may also make better use of Q and E. Some people get rid of the back pedal bind on S, but sometimes you just want a minor readjustment, so I keep it. The next thing to consider is how you group your binds. Place your hand on the movement keys. Which keys are in easy reach without you having to move your hand? It's likely that the number keys 1 to 5 are accessible, along with Q, E, R, Tab, F, G, maybe H, all being pretty easy to get at. These keys should be used to bind abilities that you will use regularly and need with no notice. I tend to use the number keys for my main output abilities. I use Q for interrupt and E for stun. I'm also making a slight change myself for Legion by placing my main movement speed increase on R. If you play alts, it's a good idea to put common abilities such as stun, interrupt, taunt, charge, etc. on the same bind so you don't get confused when switching characters. If you have abilities that are rarely used and don't need to be used without any notice, then you can bind them on keys that may require a little hand movement. These may include function keys, numbers greater than 5, depending on your hand and keyboard size and anything else you feel isn't too much travel. Do bear in mind though, you don't want to be moving your hand a lot because you also need to be moving very regularly in most cases. For some specs that might now be fine. However, even though we've had 2 expansions worth of pruning, some specs still have more abilities than others. If you feel that you just have too many abilities and macros for these binds, then you will need to think about modifiers. The modifiers that may be used are Shift, Control and Alt. Now I don't know about you, but I don't feel at all comfortable holding down any of these modifiers while hitting the common keys I've just mentioned, but this is where a gaming mouse can help. The mouse I use is a Logitech G700S and it has 4 thumb buttons. I bind these to Shift, Control, Alt and another button for auto run. The last one is just my personal preference, but the bottom line is I can have abilities bound to Shift 2 or Control 3, etc., which triples the number of binds I can have without having to move my hand. Now if you don't have a mouse like this, don't worry about it. You may just need to make more use of the keys just outside of easy use instead. If you have a mouse that has like a couple of thumb buttons, just choose 2 of the modifiers. I think most specs can get away now with, for example, maybe just using Shift and Control. Once you've set up the binds, you should practice with them a lot. You need to build up your muscle memory. As I say, to begin with, it will be very hard going. You'll make a lot of mistakes. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Eventually you will learn. For example, I used to have auto run on R, and I've literally just switched today to binding movement abilities on R. This means that I keep hitting R when I want to auto run, which now just activates my boost. On something like a Windwalker Monk, this is going to get me killed a lot. But it doesn't matter, as long as I keep practicing the new bind, I will have overwritten my old muscle memory with the new bind before Legion launches. One final point is to actively avoid having certain abilities near your commonly used binds. Know any shaman who uses heroism at the wrong time? Yeah, don't be that guy. They probably have it bound next to Lava Lash or something silly. It's often a good idea to have such abilities bound in such a way that you won't accidentally hit them when you don't intend to. Remember the possibility of fat fingering. Don't have it bound next to anything you might use earlier in the fight. I had my selfie camera bound to a macro I use on some fights and once hit it by accident on Mythic Archimond. It didn't go down well. So as always, I hope you found that useful. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you've got any specific questions, then feel free to put comments below or send an email. And until next time, I'll see you later.